Within 30 minutes of being denied entry to the French embassy, President Ibrahim Traoré had mobilized military trucks, issued formal diplomatic notices, and effectively shut down the entire diplomatic mission. This unprecedented speed of actions stunned international observers. The embassy closure wasn't just bureaucratic procedure, it was a decisive statement about national sovereignty that resonated across Africa. Let me show you the minute-by-minute breakdown of how a simple embassy visit transformed into one of the most significant diplomatic incidents of the year. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great! Thank you so much! Now, back to the video. It was just before 9 a.m. on a Tuesday when President Ibrahim Traoré approached the gates of the French embassy in Ouagadougou. The morning sun had already warmed the streets of Burkina Faso's capital, but the day's most remarkable event was about to unfold without warning or ceremony. What makes the scenario so striking is its simplicity. The president of Burkina Faso, a 35-year-old military officer who rose to power through a 2022 coup, arrived alone. No security detail surrounded him. No motorcade announced his presence. No diplomatic calls had warned the embassy staff of his impending visit. He wore plain clothes rather than military attire, carrying only a small document case under his arm. This absence of protocol violated every norm of presidential movement. Heads of state typically travel with security teams and advance notice, particularly when visiting foreign embassies. The unusual nature of Traoré's arrival speaks to both his personal leadership style and the specific message he intended to deliver. The French embassy in Ouagadougou stands as a physical reminder of the colonial relationship between the two countries. France had ruled Burkina Faso until 1960, and decades later maintained significant economic and military influence. By early morning, embassy staff had already settled into their routines, processing visa applications, preparing diplomatic communications, and managing the day's appointments. Relations between Burkina Faso and France had deteriorated significantly in the months before Traoré's visit. His government had ordered French troops to leave the country, canceled military cooperation agreements, and increasingly turned toward Russia for support. The French ambassador had been recalled for consultations, a diplomatic signal of tension. Against this backdrop, Traoré made the calculated decision to deliver his message personally rather than through diplomatic channels. This approach aligned with his public image as a direct, action-oriented leader who had promised to free Burkina Faso from foreign influence. As he walked toward the embassy entrance, none of the security personnel recognized him. The president of the nation they were stationed in, whose face appeared on television and in newspapers, was about to be treated as an ordinary visitor. The irony of the situation would soon become apparent. But in that moment, Traoré was simply a man approaching a guarded gate. What message warranted this unusual personal delivery? Traoré had come to inform the French diplomatic mission of security concerns and to discuss the future of French-Burkinabe relations. Rather than delegating this sensitive conversation, he chose to speak directly with the ambassador, a sign of both the message's importance and his straightforward leadership approach. As Traoré reached the embassy gate and prepared to identify himself, he couldn't have anticipated how dramatically the next few minutes would transform relations between the two countries. The president was about to experience firsthand the dismissive attitude that would trigger an unprecedented diplomatic response. As President Traoré reached the embassy entrance, two security guards stood blocking his path. Neither appeared to recognize the leader of Burkina Faso, a fundamental failure that defies explanation. How could security personnel at a foreign embassy not know the face of the country's president? The first guard, tall with pale skin, looked Traoré up and down with narrowed eyes. No salute was offered, no respectful greeting extended, no request for identification, which would have immediately revealed who stood before them. "No entry," the guard stated flatly. "This building is not for street visitors. Go around, make an appointment." The second guard added with a chuckle, Unless you're bringing lunch or a delivery, move along. The exchange lasted mere seconds, but revealed volumes about the underlying attitudes at play. Traoré, dressed in civilian clothes rather than military uniform, was dismissed as an ordinary citizen, perhaps even a nuisance. The guard's tone carried the casual disrespect of those who believe they operate from a position of superior authority. "I have a message for the ambassador," Traoré responded calmly. His composure in this moment was remarkable. No raised voice, no pulling rank, no angry demands for respect. The guards remained unmoved, their posture and expressions conveying clear dismissal of the man before them. What they couldn't grasp was the significance of who they were turning away and the consequences their actions would trigger. This moment of disrespect didn't occur in isolation. It happened against the backdrop of centuries of French colonial history in West Africa and decades of post-colonial influence that many Burkinabés view as exploitative. The guards' dismissive attitude, whether intentional or not, echoed a pattern of condescension that has long characterized certain aspects of French-African relations. Traoré nodded slightly, turned, and walked a few paces from the embassy entrance. He pulled out his phone and made a brief call. His words were few, but carried enormous weight. "It's me. They denied me entry. You know what to do." He slid the phone back into his pocket and walked calmly to his vehicle. No visible anger betrayed his intentions. No confrontation escalated the situation. His measured response revealed a leader thinking several moves ahead. What began as a routine diplomatic visit had, in those few seconds of dismissal, transformed into something much more significant. The guards' failure to recognize and respect Traoré wasn't just a personal slight, it represented, in his view, a fundamental disrespect toward Burkina Faso itself. As Traoré's car pulled away from the embassy, the guards likely resumed their regular duties, unaware that their casual dismissal had just triggered a diplomatic crisis. They couldn't know that military vehicles were already being mobilized or that the French embassy would soon face consequences unlike anything in recent diplomatic history. President Traoré's phone call set in motion a response that demonstrated the full authority of Burkina Faso's government. Within 15 minutes of that brief conversation, 3 military trucks arrived at the French embassy. The vehicles approached with purpose, but without sirens or unnecessary noise. Military precision characterized every aspect of their arrival. Soldiers in full uniform exited the trucks and formed a line outside the embassy gates. Their presence wasn't chaotic or threatening. They didn't aim weapons or shout commands. Instead, they stood in disciplined formation, their silence more powerful than any verbal warning could have been. Inside the embassy, the first sign of trouble came when a security officer noticed the military vehicles through the window. He alerted his supervisor, who rushed to assess the situation. The embassy staff, who moments earlier had been processing visa applications and preparing diplomatic communications, now gathered at windows trying to understand what was happening. Jean-Pierre Martel, the French ambassador, emerged from his office demanding information. "Where is the president? What happened?" he asked, his voice betraying growing concern as he realized the seriousness of the situation. The casual dismissal by security guards had escalated into a diplomatic crisis, unfolding in real time. A military officer approached the embassy entrance carrying an official envelope. Inside was a formal diplomatic letter bearing the presidential seal of Burkina Faso. The document cited continued disrespect and security concerns as justification for immediate action. All French staff were ordered to suspend operations until further notice. The embassy was effectively shut down. Traoré's response showed careful strategic calculation. He didn't overreact with threats or violence, nor did he underrespond with a mere complaint. The military presence established authority, while the formal letter provided legal justification. This balanced approach demonstrated both power and legitimacy. Embassy staff scrambled to contact Paris for instructions. The speed of events left little time for consultation. Within 30 minutes of Traoré's initial denial of entry, the entire diplomatic mission had ceased functioning. Phones rang throughout the building as staff tried to understand their options. Some began gathering personal belongings, unsure when they would return to their desks. Outside the embassy gates, word spread quickly through the neighborhood. Curious onlookers gathered at a distance, watching as additional military vehicles arrived to reinforce the initial deployment. Within an hour, the entire perimeter was secured. In Paris, French officials received urgent communications about the unfolding situation, but found themselves responding to actions already completed. The swiftness of Traoré's response had denied them the opportunity to intervene or negotiate. What began as a quiet morning visit had transformed into a decisive display of sovereignty. The message was clear: disrespect toward Burkina Faso's leadership would not be tolerated. As news of the embassy closure spread throughout Ouagadougou and beyond, reactions revealed how this incident would resonate far beyond a single diplomatic facility. News of the embassy closure spread through Ouagadougou with remarkable speed. Within hours, crowds gathered in the streets, not in protest, but in celebration. People waved Burkinabe flags, played drums, and chanted in support of President Traoré. The atmosphere resembled a national holiday rather than a diplomatic crisis. One man, wearing the red and green colors of the national flag, told a local reporter, "Today, our president showed that Burkina Faso stands tall. No one can disrespect us, not even France." This sentiment echoed throughout the capital as citizens viewed the embassy closure as a moment of national pride. Social media amplified these reactions. A video capturing the moment Traoré was denied entry began circulating online, first within Burkina Faso and then across West Africa. The footage showed the president's calm demeanor contrasted with the guards' dismissive attitude. Each share came with comments celebrating Traoré's subsequent response as a necessary assertion of dignity. Meanwhile, French officials scrambled to contain the diplomatic damage. The French Foreign Ministry issued a statement characterizing the incident as a misunderstanding that had been manipulated by a disinformation campaign. They condemned what they called violence against their embassy, attempting to reframe the narrative around security concerns rather than the initial dismissal of Traoré. These efforts fell flat among Burkinabe citizens, who had already formed their own understanding of events. The French diplomatic language, with its careful wording and measured tone, seemed disconnected from the raw emotions the incident had unleashed. As the video continued to spread across Africa, it transformed into something more significant than a single diplomatic incident. In neighboring Mali, Niger, and beyond, people shared the footage as a symbol of changing power dynamics. The image of an African president standing up to perceived French disrespect resonated particularly strongly in former French colonies. Leaders in several African nations watched these events with careful attention. Many faced similar tensions with former colonial powers and noted how Traoré's decisive action had strengthened his domestic support. Some began reassessing their own diplomatic stances, questioning whether traditional deference to European powers still served their national interests. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres released a statement calling for peace, stability, and unity in Burkina Faso, while regional organizations like the African Union and ECOWAS expressed concern about the breakdown in diplomatic relations. These measured international responses stood in stark contrast to the celebration in Burkina Faso's streets. What made this incident resonate so deeply was its direct challenge to traditional power structures. For many across Africa, the embassy closure represented more than a diplomatic spat. It demonstrated that African nations could assert their sovereignty in concrete ways when disrespected. As the initial excitement settled, a new reality emerged in Burkina Faso's international relations. The country's leadership signaled openness to seeking partnerships with other countries, with Russia mentioned among potential new allies. The diplomatic landscape had shifted in just a few hours, creating ripples that would continue to spread across the continent. When President Traoré walked away from the French embassy that morning, he transformed a moment of disrespect into a profound statement about sovereignty. In just half an hour, his response completely altered the diplomatic landscape. This incident demonstrates how rapidly power balances can shift when leaders choose direct action over traditional diplomacy. The swift closure of the embassy wasn't merely a reaction to personal offense, it represented something much larger. For many across Africa, this moment symbolized a continent reclaiming its dignity on the global stage. The aftermath continues to reshape relationships between African nations and former colonial powers, establishing new expectations for respect and recognition.